Hi and welcome to the Quiet Operator podcast. Today's guest is Krish Amin, who's the owner and director of Arrow Property, a property management business that covers Australia-wide. Krish, lovely to have you here.
Hey Nathan, great to be here.
So Krish, for those that aren't aware of what a property manager does, why don't you walk me through what it is that you actually do?
Yeah, of course. Well, a property manager, the entire role is just to make sure the landlords get paid rent on time. So we help them out end to end, and it's sort of a turnkey solution from once your asset's ready to be rented out, whether it be a house, a rooming house, a co-living property. We'll make sure to find you great tenants and make sure they pay rent on time and take care of it.
Got it. So you mentioned rooming house. So you don't just deal with a standard single house with 3 or 4 bedrooms or an apartment. You actually deal with multiple tenancies as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we deal with a lot of different niches. And the one that I particularly specialize in, I've spent the last 5 or 6 years crafting through is this multi-tenancy space, especially in areas like Victoria and WA and Queensland, where we've got such a strong market for these multi-tenancy products. So just away from just the standardized dual key products is the first step into the multi-tenancy. And then you go into bigger, more niche projects like a rooming house, where we've got basically separate studio apartments in a building with common spaces like a kitchen, a laundry, that sort of stuff.
Wow, and it's quite diverse. And what's extremely interesting is that you're still in your 20s. You're at an age where a lot of people are still figuring out what they want to do, and you've already gone through 4 or 5 years in the industry, and now in your own business for yourself. How does that compare with the people that you grew up with and maybe studied with?
Well, to be honest, I think I'm a big believer in your sort of net worth is your network. So a lot of the people I surround myself with is people who I would aspire to be, right? Or someone who I would be able to go to advice for anything I'm looking at doing. And a lot of my peers that came out through high school with me, through university, that sort of stuff, they're all running their own separate businesses as well. I've got a couple of mates who are running their own tutoring centers. I've got a couple of mates who own their own cafes, that sort of stuff. So I think everyone is I think the air was just a bit different where we grew up. Everyone's just gone into business with what they're passionate about.
Oh, terrific. And so in terms of when you made that transition across from working in the industry as an employee to actually setting it up as your own business, what's some of the things that you learnt early on that made you want to make that transition across?
100%. I think the biggest thing for me was truly understanding what we're actually doing. Aside from just finding someone a tenant and getting them rent, and from the fundamentals of the side of things, we're actually managing someone's most expensive asset they'll ever own. Like, to put perspective into that, I don't think there'll be another $1 million property or another $100,000 asset that you'll ever buy. I think you could have multiple properties, but people forget that, again, it's someone's most expensive asset. You've got to take care of it like it's your own. I think that was the biggest thing for me of why I made the switch to start up my own agency, was I felt like the broader team where I was working at was great, but small little things would make massive differences. And I thought I could bring that difference and provide even better experience for all of my clients.
Amazing. So what are some of the enhancements that you've been able to do? Is it more of a boutique service and being able to offer that more personalized side of things?
I would say to an extent, yes. But the biggest thing, and again, I'm glad you brought my age up early, it's probably the tech side that's made a massive difference. From being able to use the right tools to being able to actually... Tech is great, right? Before I get into it. But to actually get someone to use it, they need to fundamentally understand what that tool's there for. So I know a lot of agencies will have landlord portals as an example. And I think about 90% of your owners, even to date when I was working for another agency, and even today, 90% of the owners only open up that portal when something goes wrong. They're not actually using it for their need. So one of the biggest changes I made was from running it like your traditional agency, where everything is based off phone calls and emails. I want to make a massive thing around platforms where owners can log in and actually track what's going on, right? I think having that personal touch of running a boutique agency by being able to speak to someone is great. And that's one of the actual key principles we run by. Everything can be resolved with a quick phone call rather than going back and forth on an email. But why even get to the phone call if I can open up an app on my phone and it tells me, oh, the reason why I am $50 short of rent this week is because I paid a electricity surcharge, right? I think those are the big changes that we needed to implement.
Yeah, so I guess for someone as a landlord, the one thing they're wanting to know, and often they're going to be working outside of business hours, would be the time that they would be wanting to check this information. So with how you've integrated tech into the business, it's quite interesting. And you've utilized your age as an advantage in that sense.
100%, 100%.
Oh, terrific. And so sort of get into the mechanics of how it works. So you mentioned that there's a portal that your landlords can use, but what's the day-to-day running of a rental agency?
Day-to-day, well, I think it sort of morphs every day. I'd like to say that it's sort of somewhat structured, but to be honest, 90% of what I do is very ad hoc, and it would be purely dependent on the amount of stuff I was able to get through the previous day. But I would say I like to believe I'll dedicate majority of my time making sure I can give my team the right tools to be able to execute what they specialize in better. Fundamentally, I think one of the core beliefs of our team is it's a specialized role, right? I think specific individuals have a skill set that would be beneficial in a particular role. What I mean by that is, why put someone who's not comfortable with speaking to tenants in person or face to face, right, in a position of where that's the only thing they're doing? I think putting the right people in the right spots of getting someone who's great in person, loves to do open homes, is very personable, versus someone who's very detailed oriented, structured right very well, is very good with the paperwork and the admin side. I think the way we split those two up, massive. And my vision for the organization is, how can I empower my team to do better and grow with me, right? I want everyone that works with me to grow with me and feel like they've actually got a voice to be heard. So
sure.
the biggest thing, providing them tools. Yeah.
And I assume it's a predominantly young team that you've got as well that is working with you?
Ooh, I would say so. I think the average age is still probably under 30, which is very young for the industry. But yeah, we've got a few guys that are very well experienced. I think it's good to have both ways, right? Have someone who has that traditional experience come through and to enhance their skills is a separate thing, versus someone who's fresh into the industry, learns the ropes with this new enhanced way of doing stuff.
Sure. And as I guess as a client, generally speaking, we see the completed product. So we get our statement, we get money EFT'd into our bank account, and that's generally where it stops. We see when a new tenant is coming up. What are some of the things that happen behind the scenes to actually make that magic happen and give that seamless experience?
Well, quite a bit. I think you would know that the trust accounting side is probably the bane of my existence. Making sure it's all done correctly, making sure we're all compliant. But outside from that, it would also be the actual due diligence processes that we follow. So not only do we have to make sure, we're getting condition reports done, getting photos done on the correct time, the right lease agreements, setting up all the actual legally binding paperwork correctly. I think what a lot of people forget is, outside of just finding someone who's willing to pay rent, there's a lot of paperwork and processes and due diligence and compliance that goes into it. Getting a bond put through, that sort of stuff. So it's a lot that happens in the backgrounds. The biggest thing would just be the compliance side, making sure that everything we do is correct.
Sure. And have you found that the compliance is actually increasing with time since you've been?
100%. I think just with the new development with Austrac, I think the compliance side for anyone involved in the property industry, it's going to go up. And I think it's a very good thing. I think having stricter compliance rules are very good to an extent. I think it should be placed in a way of where it's actually beneficial to everyone involved versus being another box that you just have to tick off.
Sure.
I think that's my biggest pet peeve with compliance stuff. It's if it's gonna be just another box to tick off, what's the point of having it there, right? I think I'm a strong believer in there should be somewhat of a foundation to have to do something.
Sure, the benefit, and we've seen that with mortgage broking as additional compliance, and my background in mortgage broking, we saw there was a lot of benefits that came about to it, but then it would sometimes create an additional burden where you had to do the compliance because it was a requirement, as opposed to it wasn't actually enhancing the experience for the client. It wasn't providing them with additional protection.
100%.
And on clients, so how does a client come to you at the moment? Is it through referrals that you get? Is it through the network that you've got? Do you do marketing? How do you get people through the door into Arrow?
I was going to say it's a mixture of all three. I think predominantly with Arrow, we want to specialize ourselves in the new build phase and process, especially with the products that we provide to our owners with the rental guarantees, which I know we'll get into. It's, I think, fundamentally, especially in some of these pockets where we're looking at investing into institutionally, it makes sense to work with those sort of people. And that's where predominantly we focus in on. So we want to focus in on helping our channel partners getting across, actually being able to present a turnkey solution to their clients, and also working with the builders and developers and giving them background insights into what areas a specific product will work. I think the best example I can give you is a rooming house is not going to work in every single suburb that you could build a property in, but in some areas it will work better than others. And it's being able to provide that insight so the end client gets a better result.
Gotcha. So there's actually a lot more strategy in your role because you're guiding those partners in terms of the type of properties that they should be looking to build to then ultimately sell to their end users.
100%.
Well, so it's quite a lot on it. And in terms of, you touched on the fact that you have some type of a rental guarantee. So
correct.
Not something that's very common in the industry. If you
No.
mind just elaborating on how it
Yeah.
works from the Arrow perspective.
100%. I'm a strong believer of having skin in the game, right? I think it's about putting your money where your mouth is, right? I think if a property manager comes to you and says, this is the result I expect, why can't they execute on that result? And I never want to win business over purely because I've appraised the property at the highest, or I've been the agent that's come from giving you an unexpected result, right? So with our rental guarantees, we've got two main guarantees. One for our standard houses, where it starts from 6 weeks after handover, of where we'll secure market rent when we actually start construction. And we'll guarantee that for all of our clients. And then on the co-living and rooming side, very similar. We've got a 75% rental guarantee. And so anytime you've got less than 75% of your rooms occupied, we'll start topping up the rent, making sure you're getting that minimum amount.
Sure. So that would encourage you to be very efficient.
100%. 100%. Making sure that, again, it all comes down to providing the right tools for the team, making sure they've got everything in place to be able to execute their roles perfectly.
Sure. And I mean, with your industry, and particularly with things like a rental guarantee, there's a huge reputation that there's a lot of stress involved in the rental management game. And so how do you as a business and as an individual that's worked through these roles, how do you deal with those type of stresses? Because you're ultimately dealing with housing for people. There'll be times that there'll be a leaking ceiling, electricity will be out. There must be calls at all hours of the day.
100%. I think the best way to define it is my body can tell you how stressful it is with the amount of grey hairs I pull out. But I think that the biggest thing is trying to put in as many mechanisms, and it comes back to the same thing. If I've got the right tools in place and I'm able to execute out each of those individual tasks correctly, I want to alleviate 25% of what could go wrong by just doing the job correctly. I think that's the biggest way of why traditional agencies go wrong is they're very reliant on just having one point of failure. Mm-hmm. If an individual item breaks at just one point, how are you going to know how to resolve it without being able to break down that individual solution? So I think having multiple points of failure in the sense of if one item doesn't work, it still flows onto the next function. If that doesn't work, flows onto the next function, so on and so forth. I think processes and procedures are the main thing, workflows of how I alleviate them. The other side is there's always going to be issues, as you said, right? I'm always going to have an issue. For example, a bathroom tap leaks, the tap's running. We're going to have to figure out a way of how to get our plumbers out there to get it resolved. So I think that just comes down to multiple years of experience of dealing with it, but also having my own stress relieving mechanisms. Like, as you know, I'm a big sports guy. I love to watch sports, but not only, I love to play sports as well. Mm-hmm. So cricket's a big thing for me. So I think personally, that's where I got to alleviate a lot of my stress on the weekend. Go hit around a ball, have a bit of fun with the boys. I think
that decompression time.
100%, 100%. And I think everyone should have it. Not only myself. I think everyone who's working should have an element of deep compression. I think if you're thinking of working 24/7 and doing a specific item, you're gonna burn out, and you're not gonna be able to perform at your best. I think, again, I've said this so many times already. It's one of those tools is being able to perform optimally for as long as possible. And having decompression and time off to recover is a massive thing. I think it also comes down to diet and health, right? As I play a lot of sports, I go hit the gym quite a bit, but also having a good diet involved makes a massive difference, especially for myself. I used to have about 20 coffees a day back in the day. I don't think that's the right way of doing it. So I think having a balance overall in your entire lifestyle is a massive thing.
Sure. And it's interesting because you're being in business for yourself for a relatively short period of time, and you would have dealt with the stress when you were working in employee base, but is there anything different that's popped up that surprised you now that you're a business owner?
This is probably going to sound a bit nuanced and double-edged, but I think I'm more motivated than ever to perform my best. I think even with all the stress, I would say the stress of running your own business, especially the early days, is a lot more than working for someone. Working for someone, you're going to get paid, every fortnight, every month, no matter what happens, right? But working for yourself, you've got some ups, you've got some downs. Definitely had quite a few down months, definitely had quite a few up months, right? But being able to believe in your craft is a big thing. And I think working for myself gave me back a lot of that belief. And I think doing that motivated me more, to do better. All right. I think the biggest thing is not just to do more, but it's to execute better, right? Why would someone else want to work? Why would a client want to work with me versus someone else if I'm not able to provide a better service or execute better on what I promised on?
And we've talked a little bit about the downsides to having a business and the additional stress, etc. But you're in your 20s. You've built this business from scratch. You're managing a team. There's got to be some financial upsides to all of this effort you're putting in. What does this look like to you as maybe a multiple of what you would be earning if you were just in the standard workforce working for someone else versus being your own boss?
100%. I think outside of just looking at it from a dollar perspective of where I've been able to achieve, 2 or 3x of what I was making before as a salary, but it's also comes down to, I think the biggest thing for me is time, right? Getting some of my time back where I'm not trading in, working 9 to 5 for someone or, working 9 to 9 for someone to be able to execute out a task. I think being able to, get my time back to an extent of if I need to go do something in the middle of the day, like go to the post office, which I know is a massive thing for everyone. If you miss a parcel, try and track down the post office where it's not open on the weekends, only open 9 to 5. Big thing, right? Getting your time back. But financially, yes, definitely. I would say I'm making about 2 or 3 times more than I would if I was to keep working for someone else.
That's terrific. And in terms of when you've got a landlord in place, how long do they usually stay with you, and with a tenant as well? Is it a 12-month, 24-month sort of turnover?
Yeah, 100%. I would say we look to we're in business for long term, right? So not only on the landlord side, but on the tenancy side, I want to give someone, because at the end of the day, we deal in housing, right? I want to provide that security to a tenant for as long as possible as I can, right? But as an agent, you've got to have balance of both worlds, right? At the end of the day, you work for your landlord. So providing that, being that middle ground of providing balance for both sides is one of the biggest things that we do. So for my landlords, it's making sure they get a great tenant in who loves, takes care of their property, pays their rent on time, that sort of stuff. For the tenant, I've got the flexibility of, I've got someone who listens to me, right? I've got someone who actually listens to what I'm saying and execute out on what I'm doing rather than just listening, right? If I've got a maintenance stuff that comes through, they actually take care of it. And providing them that housing long term, right? So for us, we've always operated on a rule of thumb that we sort of only want to do long-term leases, 12 months typically. Majority of our tenants usually stay on for longer. You usually end up seeing a cycle about 1.5 to 2 years as an average for most tenancies anyways across the country. I've definitely managed properties where we've had the same tenant since the start of my time in the industry for 7 years, 8 years coming through. But just finding that right balance between both parties, making sure that you're able to provide a great quality service for your landlords and executing out on what their needs and wants are, and vice versa for your tenants as well.
And because I wondered, in terms of from a tenant's perspective, is it price that keeps them in the property long term, or is it actually, like you touched on, being able to fix maintenance related issues quickly and being listened to and heard and that side of things?
I would say it's a combination of both, but mainly it would be the latter. I think especially in the current economy that we're in, spending $5 extra a week in the entire year comes out to not a lot. Like you're looking at almost what's that? $250, $260 per year for someone who actually takes their time to listen to what you're doing. I think that's a massive thing. I personally I might not be in the same position as some of the tenants, right? I personally would pay extra money to make sure I'm listened after or my problems are heard. So for your tenants, it's definitely a bit of both, right? But mainly it comes down to the actual execution of what you're actually doing. Being listened to and actually having what you're saying heard and actioned.
And being able to deliver on it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And in terms of, so that's the tenant side of things, and in terms of the landlord, so you touched on the fact that you offer these industry-leading guarantees that you have, then how is that managed from a fee perspective so you don't end up broke?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, making sure that we just execute out of where we don't actually have the need to be paying out these guarantees. Why put ourselves in the position of where we're not doing a good enough job to do it? I think it comes down to the same thing of putting skin in the game, right? The main driving factor of putting the skin in the game is I've got a financial motive of making sure I do my physical best to make sure money's not leaking out of my pockets. But look, I'll be the first person to put my hands up if I haven't done the right job and not being able to execute on what I've promised. You deserve the guarantee, right? That's what that main incentive is for.
And so does your fee structure, does that mimic what is standard?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our fee structure is quite standardized across the industry. We're still operate on the same sort of percentage-based model for the guarantee, But I think the biggest tool that we have is especially for our owners is our fixed fee model as well. So we offer two main models. One is our flat fixed fee model, which is just $30 a week in management fees. And the other is our rental guarantee model. So on one side, we will make sure that you're guaranteed getting charged only X amount, no matter what your rent is, which is $30 a week. So for a property that's currently the median rent in Australia is just over $600 a week. That would mean about 5% management fees. On the other side, we've got our rental guarantee product, which has the same fee structure as our fixed fee, but rather than it being a fixed fee of $30 a week, it's a percentage, which is 6.9% of the rent.
Great. And so clients choose which one, I guess.
Yeah, correct.
Suits. And what's the general uptake of the two? Is there, I'm assuming the rental guarantee tends to have a higher uptake?
You'd be surprised. No. I think the guarantee works well in areas where there isn't enough definitive data for us to come through and say, for an owner to go on to, your realestate.coms and see properties are going to rent out for $500 a week in this area. I think the biggest driver is just providing that peace of mind, right? And I'll be the first person to say, why would you pay me, even if it's $10 extra a week in an area where I think the rents are going to be achieved anyways? I'll be the first person to say, take the fixed fee model because it works out better in your favor, saving that extra $10 in management fees each week. I think having that honesty is a massive thing, right? Rather than just looking at your bottom line, especially for your clients. At the end of the day, if you're able to provide them a great service and execute well, I think that's the main driver.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of with the business itself, you've touched on some of the benefits. You get to go to the post office during the middle of the day, which good on you for being able to achieve that. And you touched on sport. I know you're extremely active, as you mentioned, in the cricket side of things. And from that, are there any other things that this business made possible? Because you talked about that multiple of income that you're earning. Is you yourself, do you have you started buying properties yet, or is it?
Yeah, I have. I actually bought my first owner-occupied house, which was very great for me. I think it was a massive milestone.
You're about 10 to 15 years younger than the national average, just as an effort.
Wow. Wow. When you say it like that, it sounds like a bigger milestone, but in my head, it was just like, it's got to be done at some point. Might as well do it now. Mm-hmm. I think, especially from the way I've grown up with my parents, properties being a massive, not only a financial tool, but massive goal to work towards. I think as soon as I, was of the age of 15, 16, the only thing my parents would tell me is, save your birthday money. Why are you going out to spend it on something? Why don't you save up for a deposit for a house? When you turn 18, 19, 20, you'd actually come back to us saying that, thank you for, not letting me go and splurge all this money. And I actually saved the money for a deposit. All right.
Wow.
So definitely comes a lot back to my parents and the way I grew up. I think money is actually a thing that we talked about quite a bit. I think some people are unfortunate where they don't have the environment where financial freedom or money is, a common talking point, right? Mm-hmm. Or something that people are comfortable talking to you about. So again, relying on people like yourself in the industry is a massive thing as well. And I think you were the first person that I told that I was looking at buying a house as well. Called you up and was like, well, what would you say? Like, how would I structure something like this? Yeah. So I think having the ability to have those conversations is a massive thing.
No, absolutely. It's it's terrific what you've been able to do. Is the business at the point yet that we all dream of where you can take off, say, 2-3 weeks and the wheels, they may not stay on perfectly, but they won't fall off yet? Are you at that point, do you think?
I would say I am very close to it, but I have a massive milestone is I've booked myself on a holiday for 2 months from now. So, so in 2 months' time, that's my next milestone is to getting it to that point. So I think we'll see. Time will tell in 2 months.
I like that. So you've given yourself a forced deadline to get it working.
100%. 100%. Pressure makes diamonds, baby.
Terrific. And yeah, I'm sure having dealt with hundreds and hundreds of landlords and tenants, there'd be a few funny stories that you have along the way. What's one that you can share from, say, maybe a tenant story without getting yourself into any trouble?
Getting myself into trouble. Oh, I've got one. Okay. We've had a brand new house that's just finished off. The tenants came and collected the keys from us. We met them at the property, I think about 2 or 3 days before they moved in. I think it was coming up to a long weekend. Oh, yes, it was. It was the Easter long weekend. So they had the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to move in. So we met them on a Wednesday. And we were like, look, we'll give you the keys early. We understand that you'll be looking at moving on Friday. We met them on the Thursday, gave them the keys, gave them the handover, showed them everything if they had any questions. Then I get a call on, I want to say, Easter Sunday.
Okay, so you're answering your phone on an Easter Sunday. Right?
Yeah, and it was about the afternoon. I think I just had lunch, was with the family, and I just saw a bunch of messages come across. I think they went onto our online chat. We're trying to talk to the team. Of course, the team's off, but as I saw the message, I didn't want... If I was in that position, I'd want to be able to speak to someone to get a result. Just jumped on the phone, spoke to them. I was like, look, what's gone wrong? So what they told me was they'd lost the front door keys. And I was just like, okay, no worries. Look,
they've only collected the keys.
They've only collected 2 or 3 keys. And I'm assuming that they would have used those keys to start putting their furniture in. Because so what we did was we got a locksmith arranged straight away. We let them know, it's going to cost about, I think the job was about $450, but because of the public holiday, there was a surcharge, came out to about $700. Locksmith goes out, keys get changed. Once the key gets changed, I get a call back from the tenant. He was very thankful that we got everything organized. While he was on the phone with me, he opened up, I want to say it's your glove box on your passenger side, opens it up, and just sees the old keys there. And he was just like, if I've changed the locks, does that mean the old keys won't work? And I was like, yes, did you find the keys? And he's like, funny thing is, they were just sitting in my glove box. So I think that was definitely a good lesson for the tenants. Fortunately, look, we try to work with them. We work with a trade to sort of work something out for them and make sure it's not forced to bear brunt of it, especially on the public holiday. But that's probably the funniest thing that's happened. It's very recent as well, so...
Sure. And I'm pretty sure they're not going to ever lose a set of keys. So for them,
100% not. I actually told them to invest in a set of AirTags, so every time they lose their keys, they'll be able to track it down.
That's a good one. So you're finding that more and more people are actually putting an AirTag on their keychains these days?
100%. Keychains and wallets as well. Mm-hmm. I've put one in my wallet. I've definitely lost my wallet a fair few times, so I wouldn't want to be losing it again and again.
Amazing. And other than losing keys, is there some other things which tenants often get wrong that is quite easy to rectify? If they had have known.
If I had known, there would be quite a few things. I think there's not something particular which is across the board. I would say the biggest thing is, understanding your rights as a tenant, right? I'm a strong believer in advocating for a great tenant. If they've done nothing wrong, you should take it up, right? Why would you, bend over backwards for something where you haven't gone wrong? But I would say the same thing for a landlord. It's taking the advice your team gives you, right? I think the biggest thing is a lot of people forget yes, we work for the landlord. Yes, so the tenant's also a client of ours, right? We've got to find that middle ground of making sure we can find a resolution for both sides, right? Something that's mutually beneficial. But I would say for both sides of the picture, it's understanding the correct compliance of what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. Making sure that you're doing the right thing, I think is the biggest thing.
Sure. And in terms of, someone, a again, not to harp on your age, even though you mentioned the grey hairs, but someone in their 20s running a business, where do you find, and you talked on tech, but other than tech, where do you find that there might be some advantages that you have over someone that may have been in the industry for 20, 30 years and has the traditional way of working the business and getting it wrong?
I would say the biggest advantage I have, and I was taught very early on from one of my original mentors, is the adaptability side. I think that's the biggest thing of why some of these traditional agencies aren't able to operate as effectively as it would be. It's being able to adapt with time. I think there's definitely new ways of marketing for properties that people aren't taking advantage for, which we do. And I think that's one of the biggest things, right? Being able to adapt with time and being able to use what's available to you and all your resources. I think the other side is just being more personable with the clients that we work with. I work with a lot of young clientele, and it's a lot easier for me to get along with them and actually understand what they're going through versus someone, who's in their late 50s, 60s, working in the industry still, won't be as personable as it would be for me to relate to someone my age group.
Sure. So really, from everything you're saying, any of the things that people could have used as a reason not to start a business, I'm too young, it's actually, there's an advantage to it, because in your case you go, well, it means I'm better with tech, it means I've still got some knowledge, but I can actually look at new and better ways of doing it. Plus, like you've just highlighted then, a very large portion of people that are renters are actually in your age bracket anyway.
100%.
So they've got that interaction with someone that knows and understands. I would say it wouldn't just be how they think, but it would also understand how in which they want to be contacted.
Absolutely.
Text messaging is a lot larger. As every generation you go down, there's an increase in text messaging.
Absolutely.
Rather than just have a phone call or face to face. That's really interesting. So, what would be some sort of advice that you would give to someone that might be listening to this right now that's in their 20s and is hesitant to go into business for themselves? That would give them a bit more self-confidence or self-belief?
The biggest thing for me, and this was a combination of people I looked up to at that time, even yourself, you said this to me, is if not now, when? At this age group, you've got time with you. So if you don't try and take those risks, when are you going to do it? I think there's a lovely quote by, I want to say, Alex Hormozy, where it's like, I'd rather take 100 big risks in my life and only win 8 rather than taking 7 risks and winning all 7 of them. I think I'm a big believer in just giving it a go and seeing where it takes you.
If you don't play, you can't win, right?
100%. 100%. You've got to take the shot.
Absolutely. Well, Krish, I appreciate your time. Obviously, a big fan of yours for a number of years that we've interacted professionally, but just to see what you've been able to achieve in a very short period of time is extremely inspirational, mate. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Mate, thank you for having me.